I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to cover news and information that the old legacy media really doesn't want you to know about. We try to recover lost history and explain the inexplicable. Today, we truly have something that is inexplicable to plumb the depths of and to try to work through. We're very fortunate today to have Laurel Libby, a Republican member of the Maine State House or House of Representatives representing District 90. Laurel has the unenviable experience of having been censured by the illustrious members of the Maine House of Representatives, and she's going to tell us why. Welcome to On Watch, Laurel.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
We appreciate you taking time to talk to us. You've made a statement, or I guess took a position, that your colleagues in Maine in the state legislature just found totally unacceptable. And your position is obviously so radical, so unbelievable, that they decided to censure you. Mm-hmm. What in the world did you do to get the ire and wrath of your legislative colleagues?
Really tremendously shocking. I made a post with a picture stating biological facts, that a biological male had won a girls pole vault state championship. And after I made that post, instead of having a conversation around the policy, which is what needs to happen in Maine, as our policy is unacceptable, instead, the Democrat majority censured me. They've muzzled me, said I cannot vote and I cannot speak on the House floor regarding legislation until I apologize.
It sounds more like you're in, Bolshevik Russia or a Stalinist, phony Soviet Congress rather than an actual real legislature of one of the states of the United States. Those tactics are, it's an overused term, but they're Orwellian. You can't vote and you can't speak until you apologize.
That is the declaration of the Speaker of the House, Ryan Fecteau, here in Maine. It was a party line vote, and their stance is that this post was so objectionable that, yes, until I apologize, I will not be able to fulfill my duties as a sitting legislator elected by my district to represent them. And it is truly Orwellian. I don't think that term has been overused in the month plus since then. It should shock us that by a simple majority vote, a duly elected legislator could be silenced and her constituents, 9,000 of them, not have representation.
So your Democrat colleagues they're suffering from this very peculiar sort of mind virus where they deny the scientific fact of XY and XX chromosomal scientifically validated, composition that makes up men and women. I mean, it simply is. And no matter how many times you say you're a man, that's not true. And no matter how many times I would say that I'm a woman, it simply is not true. Now, you can sort of act out and you can have these various dysphorias, and there's people that are struggling with this. I'm not making fun of it. I'm not belittling it. I think there is a legitimate sort of disordered behavior and an emotional or psychological condition that people need to come to grips with. And there's probably a variety of different ways to do that, and I'm certainly not qualified to spell that out. But I do know that there are people who work through this in some way via counseling and other methods. But that doesn't deny the reality, the scientific reality of there being men and women, period. And do your colleagues in the hallway or in the cloakroom? Is there any kind of frank conversation with you, or are you just shunned?
My Democrat colleagues that I have talked with, they are absolutely dug in on this. I am shunned. And frankly, I'm a Republican who crosses party lines. I vote with Democrats on privacy and other issues when it is common sense, and when the policy position makes sense. I cross party lines and I vote with the Democrats, and that's common knowledge. And so I have a relationship with some of these Democrat colleagues, and most of them no longer talk with me. Since I made this post, they are so dug in on defending this biological unreality that they can't even talk about it.
Now, how do they benefit? Why is this the hill to dig in and die on? Why is this the most important issue for Democrats, to just refute science and reality and insist? And frankly speaking, this is really a tiny, tiny sort of boutique gender ideology issue. This is not the civil rights fight of a generation. This is a very narrow, very particular argument to fight. And so why dig in on this? Why is this so important?
I wish I understood why they're digging in on it. I honestly can't answer that question, except to say that they've backed themselves into a corner. And I think to come back from that would require at least some level of humility and an acknowledgement that they were wrong on this stance. And so I don't see that happening. I think everyone knows about the conflict between our governor, Governor Mills, and President Trump at this point, where our state doubled down. And to back off from that would be embarrassing, right? And so it doesn't matter that over 60% of Mainers do not support biological males participating in girls' sports. They have continued to double down on allowing biological males to participate, even in the face of losing significant federal funding and knowing that Maine people don't support their stance. So I can't explain it. I can tell you, I have heard from members of the at least LGB community in my district saying, thank you for defending biological reality. Keep up the fight.
Right.
And so they don't have full agreement across the board on this and are way out over their skis, but continue in this indefensible position.
It's also, I think, viciously demeaning to women. I mean, if you take this position, you're taking certainly a lot of girls, young women, but certainly women of all ages, but in the school context, whether it's, elementary school, high school, universities, younger women, and there's instances, there's reports of actual physical jeopardy, where 6'2", 200-pound male is competing in a physical way against, a 5'2" female. Just the odds, just size, weight, muscle mass, strength, radically different. But it seeks to really make women invisible, to zero out. It zeroes out accomplishment and achievement. It zeroes out opportunity. How do they defend that? How can they be so rabidly anti-woman?
And that's exactly what it is. It's an anti-woman position. When you look back at history, even history in athletics, right? About 50 years ago, the first woman ran the Boston Marathon, and she ran it when she wasn't allowed to. Women were not allowed to run the marathon. And so as she ran the marathon, the race director actually tried to physically, forcibly remove her from the course. And her husband and others had to defend her physically and help her stay on the course. And now 50 years later, we are telling two girls who placed second to a biological male in the pole vault state championship here in Maine that they don't matter, because there is a boy, a young man, who competed last June and prior as a male, and now has decided to compete in the female category. And they don't matter because he should be allowed to participate as a female, win the state championship, and displace them from their rightful first place.
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling.
And this goes also to scholarships, right? There's people, there are young ladies who are training and just, fighting like hell to be in a position where they'd be recruited by various universities and colleges to play any number of sports for those universities and colleges. And this skews that completely. My daughter, who's now grown, married, children of her own, but when she was a kid, she was a junior Olympian swimmer and had done very well, all kinds of opportunities because of that, played water polo in university. She had a tremendous set of opportunities, but if there was some guy, and she's no, wilting daisy by any stretch of the imagination. She's very strong, very tough. But if there's some guy in the pool there who is, 30% larger, 50% greater lung capacity and muscle mass, how in the world does anybody think that's fair? How that's even-handed? Again, does anybody have any data? Does anybody on the other side come back to you and say, well, listen, here's where you're wrong, and they give you some kind of facts, scientific studies, journal articles? Can anyone substantiate this to argue against you?
What I hear from the other side is it's not very many. So there's not very many biological males participating in girls' sports, so we should allow it. And so, no, that's not statistics. But right now here in Maine, there are 2 biological males. There are others who have participated in girls' sports prior. I'm sure more to come. But at this moment, in indoor track and Nordic skiing this winter, there were 2 biological males participating in girls' sports, both of them displacing females from the podium.
Right.
And both of them, one of them, previously displaced females from the podium in cross country. So this is ongoing. And what I hear from the left, the ultra progressive left, is it's only a couple. Well, you know what? That's a couple young women. How many young women is acceptable to discriminate against? How many Maine women and girls? What's the acceptable number? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 10? What's an acceptable level of discrimination
right.
On this policy? I would say 0. And as far as numbers go, there are a lot of numbers that say this is a much bigger problem than these extremists would like to acknowledge. For example, the UN has numbers from, I believe, last year that indicate that there are 900 medals and podiums that have been taken from athletes across the globe in the last few years in 27 or 29 different sports. So no, this is not a small problem. It's not an athlete here and there. This is a growing issue that we need to acknowledge and root out and ensure that our girls have a fair, safe, and level playing field.
And even beyond sort of the podium and medal question, there's the much more sort of mundane and routine situation of just locker room and bath, shower room, locker area, bathroom, privacy, safety type issues. My guess is that high school girls really don't want some dude in the same locker room, changing, showering with them. It's just, for lack of a better term, I'm not going to be very technically accurate here. It's just freaky, right? It's a creepy thing. You got a 16-year-old girl, some 18-year-old guy changing, pretending he's a girl. It's just weird, right? It's a safety issue. It's a privacy issue, isn't it?
It absolutely is. The only, experience I can liken it to is I was a cross-country and track athlete in college, a very mediocre one, but had to change in the locker room. And I barely wanted to change in front of my female peers, let alone if there had been a male in the locker room.
Right,
And I
right.
recently heard a story of a young woman here in Maine. She's in her senior year of college, and since all of this has broken, she's spoken up. And she told the story of having to change in a locker room with a boy in the locker room pretending to be a girl in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom. I have kids that have been in 7th grade, and it is appalling and shocking to me that the folks who are in power in our state and across the country are insisting on policies that put our children, our girls, at not just safety risk, but also the embarrassment in the position of not knowing what to do because those in power are putting this policy in place. So what do you do against that?
I believe outside of Chicago recently, there's a really horrific instance, and you're probably familiar with it, of girls being forced to change. The teachers or administrators got involved and forced a locker room situation where the guy was in there and they made the girls change. I mean, that's child abuse. That's endangerment, in my opinion. And I mean, this is people taking it to such a bizarre extreme that they're really harming others. This is not just, oh, I don't like your opinion, we disagree. There's real harm being inflicted here.
And what are these girls to do when this is the authorities in their life telling them this, right? It's an incredibly powerless position to be in.
Right.
The people who are supposed to be protecting you are the ones inflicting harm. And yes, I agree with you, inflicting abuse in this scenario.
Yeah.
And I know a state rep in Illinois, this child's state rep is a different one from my friend, and has essentially called her a liar. And so it's remarkable. You have people who are finally willing to speak up, right, and talk about the atrocious things that are happening, whether we're talking about Chicago or Maine or anywhere in between. And they're being called out, being called liars, being told, we don't believe you because it's an issue we're on the other side of. It is appalling. And it does explain why more people don't speak up and are reluctant to speak up because of the treatment that they anticipate if they do.
Well, I anticipate that it'll be a very cold day in hell before you apologize to your Democratic colleagues there in Maine.
That is very accurate.
And I congratulate you and I thank you for sticking to your guns on that, because there's a lot of other politicians who would, whichever way the wind blows, they'll jump on board. So I congratulate you for doing that. But let's take it a little step further. So who's on your side? Who says, Laurel Libby's got guts and she's brave and strong and we should support her? Is there anybody doing that?
Absolutely. I can tell you, hands down, I have heard from, I think at this point, thousands of Mainers who not just appreciate the stance, are urging me to keep to it. And while it already was going to be a cold day in hell before I apologize, certainly I've heard enough urging, stay the course, fight, 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 continue, that it will be a cold day. And so Maine people, huge support, incredible. I don't hear much from the Republican Party, unfortunately, in our state. My colleagues in the House did all vote against the censure, but I would say the strongest support that I have felt has been from Maine people who have proven to me that they absolutely do not support this absurd policy of allowing biological males to participate in girls' sports. And interestingly to me, I even hear from liberals who they may not appreciate the way I went about my post, but they do not believe I should be censured. And they also agree that biological males have no place in girls' sports.
Any national endorsement or encouragement, not just necessarily from political leaders, but even from, so-called, I hate using the term, but influencers, people who have the ear of others or get notice. I just don't think, from my perspective, I don't want you hanging out there in the breeze by yourself. You know what I mean? You people should rally around what you did and just support objective scientific reality and somebody who has the guts to say it. And you shouldn't just be sort of this one-off, unusual case that's a historical footnote. You should not be a footnote.
No, I've learned in the last month and a half for sure that there's a lot of folks out there fighting this battle and have felt the encouragement from many of them, including Riley Gaines and others, and so appreciate that. And I can tell you, as far as across the country, I particularly have heard from a coalition of legislators in Montana. I think I've heard from just about the whole Republican caucus out there encouraging me to stay the course. I've heard from other legislators across the country. I've also heard from a tremendous number of Californians, which is interesting considering the vote that just happened in that state today. But I've heard from so many Californians, I've kind of given them their own category. And the phone calls or voicemails and emails all start like this. Hi, I'm from California. I'm a Democrat, and I totally agree with you. It's some version of that.
Right,
and so
right.
Californians, and particularly California Democrats, have got their own special place. I've heard from so many of them.
That's very good to hear. I'm hoping that while your governor locks horns with President Trump should probably come out and give you an endorsement as well for just common sense, realistic, science, fact-based. You need endorsement and encouragement. Is there any sort of political solution for you, or is this you've now been dropped down the memory hole? You're in a political never land forever, or is there some effort to, without you apologizing, is there some way to rehabilitate you and bring you back into the active political world?
Well, absolutely. Two things that I would reference there. One is that certainly, while I haven't talked directly with the Trump administration, felt their support. As we've seen federal action starting to take place here in Maine, there are investigations that are ongoing into biological males participating in girls' sports in Maine. And we need the Democrats in Maine to back down and do the common sense thing, because otherwise Maine students are going to be losing significant funding that we can't afford to lose. And then as far as remedy, I have filed suit, and our hearing with the district court judge is on Friday of this week. So very much looking forward to our day in court with the federal district court and getting that ball rolling, because my constituents need remedy. I have 9,000 constituents without a voice and without a vote.
Yep.
And that is absolutely unacceptable to me.
I agree with you 100%. If I were somebody in the Trump administration, within the structure of the United Nations, I believe that there's a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations that deals specifically with issues pertaining to women and girls. It's like a women's interest, because there's a number of UN agencies dealing with that. And if I were in the Trump administration, you'd be the next U.S. ambassador to the UN for that portfolio, because you've earned it, right? You've got the courage of your convictions, and you're obviously very talented and bright and accomplished, and you'd be a great representative for us.
Well, I certainly appreciate your endorsement.
I'm going to give you the final word. People that are watching us or listening to us on our different platforms that we go out on, we reach a ton of people via this podcast, thanks to the great support of people who like Judicial Watch. What is your message for the average citizen who feels either bewildered or frustrated? And what can they do to follow you, and what can they do to kind of advance your position on this?
I think so often those of us with common sense feel like we're in the minority. And really, the minority is this very loud group of folks who are talking nonsense and advancing a woke agenda that we don't agree with.
Right.
The quieter majority needs to speak up. And so I have certainly seen over the last month and a half, many folks encouraged to speak up. And that's yet another reason that I will not back down from my position. We need to stand and take a stand and then not be moved. So folks can follow what's going on in Maine at my Facebook page, Representative Laurel Libby. They can also find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, and also at standwithlaurel.com. And I really appreciate you having me on today and highlighting what's going on in Maine and across the country as we seek to protect our girls and ensure a fair, safe, and level playing field and ensure that women's rights are upheld after the many years of fighting that women have had to get to where we are today.
Laurel Libby, you're a brave, smart lady, and the people of Maine are lucky to have you. And I wish you all the best going forward with your lawsuit and finally dragging Maine back into a reality, one that's based on science and biological facts. Thank you for your time joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I'm Chris Farrell, on Watch.